All righty, welcome back from the episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Wednesday, December 14th. We are exactly 1 week away from early National Signing Day, and there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that are coming out, commitments, flips, everything else, recruiting picking up. Some players are drifting away. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Mainly, we're going to be talking all recruiting in this episode, and then we're going to be talking a little OU to the SEC potentially in 2024. I also want to announce, and if people have been following us on Twitter, we've announced it. We will be going live on Wednesday, December 21st for an early National Signing Day stream with JP and Travis Davidson. If you guys don't follow them on Twitter, go follow them there. They've been on before, so I assume most of our subscribers have seen them or watch their show as well. So they'll be joining us. We'll be talking all things early National Signing Day, who signs, our opinions on players, various other things, and we're hoping to get some players to join us. Nothing confirmed. That's kind of our plan, and we're going to try to do that and organize. Nothing's for sure on the players, but we're going to try our best to do so. So with that in mind, subscribe to the channel, like this video, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Apple, Facebook, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. We're like at 2,700 Twitter followers for nearly 3,000, so go follow us there. Instagram, as we're recording this, I think is like one follower away from 1,000. So if you haven't followed us on there, go over there. Everything's linked in the description below. So today we're going to be talking OU picked up Dave McCullough, flipped him from Cincinnati, picked up the transfer to Son McCullough. We're going to be talking a little to Celia Akana. He's been picking up some crystal balls in favor of Oklahoma. David Hicks, Micah Tees, Quincy Rhodes, and obviously some OU to the SEC potentially in 2024. All right, so first and foremost, I feel like that we need to talk about and something that's not overly shocking, and we've been talking about for, I guess, the last week or so, week and a half, the McCullough Brothers. They announced their commitment and flip, I guess they flipped to Cincinnati, or from Cincinnati. They're a part of this 2023 class, and OU has the number one transfer class. Already 3 transfers coming in, which is pretty strong. Day, I think, has a lot of versatility. What are some of your initial thoughts on them? I think they're both huge additions, especially Deshaun. I'm not trying to minimize Day, but Deshaun is going to show up and compete for and contribute day one. And Day might, but Deshaun obviously did last year at Indiana.
Yeah, and I mean, Merry Flip-Mas, everyone. We're getting to that part of the year where it seems like Oklahoma's going to get a couple more guys. Yeah, Day, biggest thing with him, and it seems like some people, even though it's been addressed by multiple people multiple times, the addition of Day McCullough is in no way trying to take Peyton Bowen's potential spot if he does decide to flip. Again, most people at this point believe that flip is just inevitable. But as of today, or when we're recording this, still hasn't happened. With the Deshaun, that's definitely the one that's going to be more impactful day one because of how good he was in the Big Ten year one. People expect him to come in and pretty much fill in that Deshaun White role, the cheetah position, because we don't really have anyone that would probably be a good replacement for Deshaun, regardless of what some fans believed. Some people are saying Deshaun White was terrible. Did he have his bad games? Yeah, the entire defense had their bad games, especially early on. But after the bye week, he played well for the most part. They're not going to play a perfect game, and none of the defense was near playing a perfect game. But he was playing just as good as anyone on that defense with his best games. And Deshaun has that expectation coming into next year now. Do I think he will be perfect and ready to go day one? He'll probably need like a couple of adjustment games, but that's why we have these non-conference games to start the year off. He'll need to capitalize on that. Luckily, he's talented enough. You mentioned, and why he committed to Oklahoma was Brent Venables' defensive scheme and getting people NFL ready. He clearly knows what it takes to get to a starting position and hold on to it, because it's not easy to do that as a true freshman. He did it at Indiana. I know it's not the biggest name for a college football program, but they're also not a terrible program either. So, I mean, have that or take that as you will, but he's going to be an impact player next year.
For sure. I mean, he is. I think he's going by mid-season. He's going to be a significant upgrade. I mean, he fits the prototypical what they're looking for in that cheetah position. I mean, in the thought of him coming in and playing that position, could PJ Adebore contribute day one, year one? He very well might. He's that guy. Thinking about those two guys coming off the edge, that's a lot of versatility and a lot of athleticism that Oklahoma needs. And I just don't think it can be understated the fact that, they want to go play together, and OU evaluated both these guys and they, see them as contributors for Oklahoma. Day's also got some good size for him. I think he's 6'2". I am double checking myself right now, but I believe, he's 6'2", 200 pounds already in high school. So he might not be done growing. He might be 6'3", go up to 210, 215. He can contribute. And I agree. I don't think this has any bearing on Peyton Bowen because the depth that Oklahoma needs and the losses that they've had, and honestly, not so great play there. It's not like that there's been elite safety play that, these guys are not going to see the field, and you've got Makari Vickers. You bring in Dave McCullough, Eric McCarty, and then you've got Makari Vickers and Peyton Bowen. That is elite of elite of a haul. I mean, I know that Alabama, got Caleb Downs and, it's Alabama, but that is arguably one of the best safety classes that you can bring in one cycle.
You can just mix that for DBs because Makari can play corner and safety. And if you just want to include DBs, you're also throwing in a top 100 player, Jacoby Johnson, who is an elite athlete. Yeah, Josiah Wagner. You've got a good haul of a secondary. And again, that, like you said, it has no bearing on Peyton Bowen coming to Oklahoma potentially. And it's more so for looking forward because after next year, Billy Bowman has a good year, could be NFL bound. Key Lawrence, probably, I'm pretty sure he'd be out of eligibility at that point. Most COVID years will be done by next year, if not all of them. So really, you're kind of coming down to a lot of youth or inexperience. RSJ would at that point would be your most experienced player in the safety position group. You would have Jermaine Burt. I can't remember his name, but he was in last year's class. Then this 23 class would be right there with him. So it's also looking for the future. Date may not be a year one contributor, could be in the 2 deep. Definitely would expect him to get a lot more playing time year two with the safety position and the possible departures after next season.
Yeah, and you look at your group in the whole safeties. I mean, currently right now they have 5 players. When you look through and then you add in Kendall Dolby as the JUCO player, who's the number 1 corner, you bring in Peyton Bowen. I mean, you bring in 6, 7 guys. You might not see it immediately on the field. I do think that play on the field will be better. But this is a lot of talent, an influx of talent in a defensive backfield that is much needed. And this is just one cycle of it. You give it another cycle or two and you have these guys and you bring in a younger class in 24 and 25. All of a sudden, that back end of the defense looks night and day different. And so I think this is a significant building block. And, if they bring in Peyton Bowen, I mean, that is the icing on the cake for this. And I think that's as good as you could ever hope for in year one of a full cycle for Venables and his staff. And I just can't state it enough. Like, we should be very excited, especially if Peyton Bowen, even if Peyton Bowen doesn't go to Oklahoma, I am still happy with what they've done for the defensive backs here. I think it's great.
Yeah, and for just to talk about the defensive recruiting, I know we're going to talk about more recruits here in a second. It seems like a reoccurring theme with the fan base has been Oklahoma's not closing on elite defensive recruits. We can't recruit defensive players. If you look at the class, the top 10 players, 7 of them are defensive guys. The only guys that aren't on the defensive side of the ball are Caden Green, Jaquez Petaway, and 5-star quarterback Jackson Arnold. Outside of that, you've got 5-star edge rusher PJ Adebawore, 4-star safety Makari Vickers, 4-star DB Makari Vickers, 4-star athlete Jacoby Johnson, 4-star linebacker, top 100 player as well still, Samuel Masigo, Derek LeBlanc, 4-star, 4-star Lewis Carter, 4-star Josiah Wagner. Like they're recruiting the defense. They're trying to build towards the future. I understand the frustration that you didn't see year one, but you also gotta patience. Development doesn't happen in 3 months or 2 months. It takes a year, 2 years to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, and 6 defensive backs are currently committed. They could add Peyton Bowen as a 7th. That's a significant portion of this class. I mean, you add Peyton Bowen and you that's like 25% of your class is defensive backs. So they know what they understand where the need is. And you're right, defense is dominant in this class. And when you look at this class as a whole, when you factor in the transfers, they have the number 5 class in the country. And that is before, let's talk about him again, another defensive guy, Akana. So Akana, I feel like most people that are watching this have heard his name and are not shocked that we're talking about him. Akana is from Lehigh, Utah, the number 34 player in the country. There was actually just an update from 247 Sports today as we're recording this, which is Tuesday. He bumped up 8 spots. He's the number 4 edge player in the country and the number 1 player in the state of Utah. It's really kind of come down to Oklahoma, LSU, Oklahoma, A&M, Oklahoma, Texas. And what Parker said when he came on our show is the one common denominator is Oklahoma. And today, Akana received a crystal ball. Parker Thune was already in on him, but Wilt Fong and Brandon Drum both gave crystal balls in favor of Oklahoma. I think Josh McQuiston from Rivals, put a crystal ball in favor of Oklahoma here. So obviously things are moving in the right direction. And whenever Parker Thune came on, I don't know, a few months ago, like maybe in October, September, somewhere in there, we had him on, and he was talking about Akana, and he said, this is the guy that Brent Venables has gone out of his way. There's 1 or 2 guys in each class that Brent Venables picks and primarily recruits them. And Akana is that guy. And generally when Venables does that, he lands them. And Akana came out, on Twitter on Monday and said, stay tuned for my announcement in the next few weeks. Well, obviously he doesn't have much time because he's going to be an early enrollee from my understanding. So he's going to have to announce. It seems like it's going to be a national signing day announcement. I have no idea, but that's just the feeling I get with his tweet. And I just don't know if he's going to go public before he signs. What do you think?
I agree. That was where I was going to lead it off. This is more than likely going to be one that we find out on the 21st. And could have happened before, sure, but it really doesn't seem like he's in any rush to get an edit out like a lot of recruits are nowadays. Not that it's a bad thing. He just seems like he's very private. Insiders have a very tough time getting too much information with his recruitment. The one thing where I felt a lot more confident than even after Thune was on this last time was when in-homes first started. Brent Venables and position coaches. When Brent Venables was visiting, he mainly was visiting guys that were already committed. But the position coaches were the ones that were going and trying to kind of gauge where potential commits are, where how those feelings are with them, so that Brent isn't wasting his time, because he's got a lot to do outside of recruiting. Even though it is the recruiting season, they're still running practices. He's got a plan, all that jazz. Not that the position coaches don't, but head coach has a lot more on his plate than the position guys do. Well, Brent Venables visited Akana. I think it was just a few days after the in-home visit days opened. That, even though he's not committed, as we've said, gave me a lot more confidence in where this recruitment was going, because of that pattern of Brent Venables only visiting committed guys. There's a chance that he's silently committed. That's always a possibility. It doesn't mean he has to stop in-home visits if other coaches might visit him. Haven't seen anything on that happening between now and National Signing Day, but I mean he is the Brent Venables guy. Brent Venables has been recruiting him since he was at Clemson, and everything transferred over to now that he's in Norman. It's going to be interesting how he's going to be used year one. I know a lot of people probably excited about him, not just because of his rating, because they would expect him to play year one. He is being recruited for a lot of defensive positions, linebacker, edge, cheetah. And if you watch his tape, he does do a lot of pass rushing. And what impresses me about his pass rushing ability is he's not like a lot of high school players where they're just going to overpower their opponent. So for the most part, highly rated high school players are also just bigger and stronger than their opponents that they're standing across from. He might be bigger and stronger than some of them, but he's also using some skill to try to get around the tackle. He's not just bull rushing and overpowering the guy. He's doing swim moves, spinning, doing a bull rush, trying to just fighting through. Like he's got some just natural ability to rush the passer. And if you watch more of camp tape, if you can find any, he does do well at covering at pass coverage. So he'll probably be the number 2 to Deshaun McCullough year one. Would be my expectation for his freshman year, and maybe get some playing time early on in the season. It would really just depend on how his development and how much muscle they can add on, because he is kind of a slender guy. Most high schoolers are, but we'll see. It. He would be a huge addition though, and that would just keep building on to what is currently the number 5 class in the country.
Yeah, and not even factoring in transfers, which Oklahoma is killing it. I mean, we can't forget about Austin Stogner, and Jacob Lacey can't be overlooked on the transfer there. But if Oklahoma ultimately lands Akana, and I know that the teams above them right now, when you are just factoring straight high school commitments, OU sits as the number 8 class because Miami jumped us. They picked up Ruben Bain as we're recording this on Tuesday. You add Cecilia Akana to this class, they immediately jump Notre Dame to number 3, and that's with Peyton Bowen committed to Notre Dame. And immediately they go to the number 3 class, just high school commits. You flip Peyton Bowen, you're not going to pass Georgia, but you're really darn close. So even just a Cecilia Akana, I mean, he's the number 34 player in the class. And you think about Deshaun McCullough, Cecilia Akana, PJ Adebore, Peyton Bowen potentially, McCarty Vickers, Jacoby Johnson, Lewis Carter. I mean, this class, I don't think people really realize a couple more guys. I'm not even talking about David Hicks. Like, that ship to me has sailed. That's where my expectations are. We'll talk about him next. But even if you don't land David Hicks, and I understand he's the biggest fish and the biggest prize that we're looking for, this class is awesome. And Cecilia Akana is elite. And I think people need to remember that when you're like, if you just want one thing and you're like locked in and that's David Hicks, you got to take a second and take a step back and look around what is actually happening around you. I understand the disappointment potentially there, but I mean, this Cecilia Akana is massive. And I think that edge in the cheetah position is instantly way better than it ever has been in Oklahoma. And the play that we're going to see out of the linebackers is going to skyrocket over next year and even the following year after that. Like, people got to remember how good this could actually end up being. We're going to look back on the 23 class with the transfers and the high school kids and really look at this as a foundational class for this whole program.
Yeah, I agree. And especially with the defensive side, I mean, the head coach is defensive oriented. This shouldn't surprise people, but I feel like the expectations we're only landing 5 stars and highly rated 4 stars. Well, that's really not realistic unless you're Texas A&M and you're going to pay a boatload of cash to everyone that steps through your facility. Oklahoma, while they are playing the NIL game, is still mainly focused on relationships and culture fit and how do coaches get along with you? How do you get along with the coaches? I'm sure that they're looking at how the class mixes in general and getting feedback from those guys that are already committed. Like, hey, do you see yourself at least hanging out with him, for the next 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years of your life, because that's their reality. It's not us and all of you guys that we just get to watch them and hopefully get to see them win, and maybe one day get to see them win a national championship. They got to deal with everything day in and day out for the next 3 to 5 years of their lives. So it's a big decision, and like you said, these guys are going to. They're a great foundation to what could happen in the future. If these guys meet the expectations of the fan base and even more so, more importantly, of the coaches, this Oklahoma is this 2022 season is just going to be a blip on the radar in the next 5 years.
For sure. So let's move on. I already alluded to is David Hicks. Oklahoma is going to be doing an in-home visit with David Hicks this week. David Hicks is coming off of another visit in Eugene, Oregon. He's got an official visit with Texas A&M this weekend. Seems like Oklahoma's last chance to convince them. And, for the 5-star defensive lineman, the best defensive lineman in the country, his dad has come out and done interviews with, I don't know, maybe it was On3, I think it was. Basically, his dad said that it's going to take a lot, or it's going to be really hard to flip him from Texas A&M. And maybe there's a million reasons why. But, it's just Oklahoma, you can't fault them for not doing their best. But at the end of the day, if his heart is at Texas A&M and other factors are at Texas A&M and he's closer to home, and I know family's a big deal with him, Oklahoma's going to be fine. And I just think that my gut's telling me he's not going to be a part of this class. But again, at one point I thought he was going to be a part of this class, and he shocked everyone. So I can't say never, but it's just my expectations are minimal.
Yeah, don't expect this to go Oklahoma's way, and it's been trending that way. I know some people have been thinking or assuming we're sunshine pumpers, kind of like Drum and Thune with where this has been, but realistically, it has been pretty open until it seems more recently. Oregon is making a huge push, and for these guys, and I think you said it last time. It's Damian Sanford and potentially where he feels more comfortable. Oklahoma may not be the place where he feels that way, and Eugene and College Station are. It's unfortunate, sure, but again, we just went through the guys we do have. Hicks would be a great addition, but he's not going to be a make or break of this 23 class. Now, this Thursday in home is going to be big. This is going to be one where Brent Venables is going to be visiting along with Todd Bates, so pretty important. Kind of their last swing of it before early National Signing Day. Now, again, he's not guaranteed to sign on the 21st. Right now, that is the sentiment and what a lot of people believe. But if we think back to the summer, no one expected him to even announce until early January during the Under Armour All-American game. This could go a little longer. Seems unlikely. But if Thursday goes well, then that could potentially be what happens, where he pushes back signing that letter of intent. I agree with you. Doesn't seem likely, which is fine, but you win some, you lose some. And that's just going to be one where you look back and maybe you're like, all right, I'm glad we didn't get him, or you're going to look back and say, man, I wish he would have stuck to that silent commitment he had after the party at the Palace back in the summer. One thing that his dad said in the interview, or at least the one that Steve Wiltfong's article, was that a couple of the factors were staying closer to home, which just makes sense, and then another one was like that iron sharpens iron mentality, where that defensive line has a lot of really good prospects and a lot of talent, and I get that to an extent. But if you look at A&M, their defense was okay. It wasn't amazing. their defensive line, they got destroyed in the run game in some of those games. So it's more like stainless steel sharpens paper. Not really anything sharp over there. So I don't know. And then you see that they're getting a lot of people to leave from the 22 and 21 class. It's not like Jimbo Fisher's having to rebuild a culture. It's been his culture, and you're seeing all these kids leave. Like, yeah, there's a lot of factors, and I get it's their decision. But what he is saying versus what we're seeing happen in real time don't make sense.
No, they don't. I mean, I don't know. It seems bizarre, this whole recruitment. It's taking a lot of twists and turns. And if he doesn't sign next week, I think that's a good sign for Oklahoma. It gives Oklahoma more time for Sanford. Obviously, assuming Sanford doesn't sign either. I mean, that's actually a better thing to think about. If Sanford signs, it's over. I don't know. I get wanting to play with your best friend, but in a way, I think if I were in that position, I would do what's best for me personally at the end of the day. But I don't know. Maybe there's other factors that are involved. So,
and Drum has mentioned it a couple times. The last few times he's talked about Hicks on their streams, and the interviews he's done is it's not so much that they're not comfortable with the schools that they're looking at. It's that they're still unsure about A&M. This official visit this weekend is not just the in-home visits that are going to happen during the week, but this official visit during this weekend is going to be big for A&M. If they can't find a way to lock these kids up, then they have a lot more problems than they thought too. Because after you go 5-7 and you lose a lot of kids to the portal, and I know it's happening to a lot of people, but they're losing a lot of really talented guys that they were excited about when they first committed. It's going to be a tough look for Jimbo Fisher, and those A&M boosters better start opening those checkbooks up even more, because they're going to need to get out of that contract with Jimbo sooner than they expected.
Yeah, for sure. So something we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on, and we might have an update for Friday's episode, or maybe Monday or Sunday's episode. So we'll have to figure it out. But just not trying to be a sunshine pumper. Keep your expectations at a minimum. If something happens, great. But he's out of my mind. A part of this 23 class, which is okay. I mean, you can't land everyone. I mean, Alabama doesn't land every single 5-star. So they land a lot of them in this 23. They landed a lot of them in this 2023 class, though. A lot of top 50 players. So we'll move on to another guy, and it seems to be some positive momentum, and it's a guy that we talked about for a long time, Micah Tease. 2023 4-star. He's an athlete, can play both ways as far as a corner and wide receiver. Currently committed to Arkansas. He's a top 115 player according to 247. Seems like there's some positive momentum around Oklahoma and Tease. Oklahoma's recruiting him as a wide receiver now. Obviously, they lost a wide receiver commitment and Anthony Evans, so a spot has opened up now, and they're loaded up on the defensive backfield, and he doesn't want to necessarily play as a defensive back. And unfortunately, if Oklahoma would have offered him as a wide receiver earlier, we probably wouldn't be at this point right now. So Micah Tease is currently committed. Oklahoma has done an in-home visit with him already once. They're going to be doing another one with him. I think it's this week. There seems to be a lot of communication and a lot of momentum going on. I think also the uncertainty with Arkansas. Sam Pittman didn't have a great season. They also, there's some rumors around Kendall Briles as he's still getting looked at different, for different positions. Maybe I saw an article maybe a couple of days ago that Auburn might be targeting him for an OC job, and various other reports that have come out. Then they also did lose their tight ends coach, which doesn't necessarily affect him, but more so Luke Hawes, which there doesn't seem to be a ton of momentum with Oklahoma with Hawes, but that could quickly change. There seems to be some uncertainty with Arkansas, and I think Oklahoma's a safe spot for him considering his brother played with him. But Oklahoma did offer another wide receiver from the state of Tennessee, and this could be a way of them, pushing this along, because they're going to take one receiver one more high school receiver in this class, it seems like, no matter what. And the guy that they offered is Chance Fitzgerald. Gosh, I can't talk. Fitzgerald, who's teammates with Taylor Wine. So if Oklahoma pushes for Chance Fitzgerald, you know that boat from Micah Tease has sailed. I think they're prepared to move on from Tease, but Tease is going to have to make his decision soon. And honestly, I kind of feel like Tease is a part of this class for some reason. I don't have really any reason to believe that other than my gut. I feel like he's going to be a part of this class, and that's just my opinion.
I don't know. This Tease thing it's strange to me only because Oklahoma put themselves in this corner because of the stubbornness. And we've talked about the coach's stubbornness pretty much mainly throughout the actual season because they were pretty stubborn in some of their decisions. But that stubbornness with this player's recruitment exclusively, where they really only wanted him at corner, but he wanted to be a wide receiver, like you said, is the reason we are now in this position where we're having to try to scramble and flip him. I get it from Oklahoma's perspective. You know, they want another player at the wide receiver position. I don't know how much offering another player is really going to affect him deciding faster or not, especially after Oklahoma has shown that they're a little bit more desperate than Tease is to flip. Like, would he want to do it? And was it always expected to be his landing spot? Because he is from Oklahoma, his brother did play at Oklahoma. They're Oklahoma, born and raised. Yeah, but shot ourselves in the foot, and now we're having to try to backtrack and kind of give him in a way, it's kind of an ultimatum, like flip soon or we're going with this other guy. Like if I were him, I'd be like, all right, then like I don't have to make my decision on your time. You guys want me back after you fucked up. Like, now, does he do it? I agree. It seems like that is the growing sentiment, but I really wouldn't take this Chance Fitzgerald offer as a do it or not, do it or don't do it, or do it or we're moving on from you, because they've already moved on from him once because of their stubbornness. Like, what motivation does he have to leave? And I get that Arkansas hasn't done great. They had a really good season last year. This last season wasn't amazing, but their quarterback was also hurt for a few games, so you can have that as a situation. I mean, we'll see what happens. I think the Luke Haas, if he ended up leaving for whatever reason, not even to Oklahoma, but we talked about it in our last video with Alabama, taking an in home with him. If he left, I think that's where Oklahoma's chances get a little bit better and more certainty goes towards, he flips to OU.
I would tend to agree. And it seems like Luke Haas is open for business. Obviously, they ended up losing his tight ends coach recently. So it seems like things are opening up some. Obviously, he was okay with Nick Saban coming by. And who's to say that there isn't someone else coming to do an in-home with him? It would suck seeing another player leave the state of Oklahoma to go play for Alabama, because two of the top, I would argue, 10 players in the state of Oklahoma would then be going to Alabama, him and Cole Adams. I wouldn't rule out Alabama because Nick Saban is a tough guy to say no when he wants you right before early national signing day. I'm sure he is very persuasive with the way he recruits. So.
Well, and Oklahoma doesn't seem to need or want any more tight ends at this point. I mean, they weren't really pursuing Malachi, and for whatever reasons, I mean, we were recruiting a tight end, backed off of that, got Sogner. We have Caden Helms, we have Jason Llewellyn, getting McIntyre in this class for that position. Their focus seems to be elsewhere, which is fine. So the Luke Haas thing is whatever, but again, stubbornness, didn't want to. I mean, it's happened multiple times. They've shot themselves in the foot with multiple players in this 23 class, and not that other schools don't, but focusing on Oklahoma, shot ourselves in the foot with Micah, not wanting to get him at wide receiver earlier on, and just wanted him a corner. Shot ourselves in the foot with CJ Blocker, safety that we just recently offered. Now he's back at Utah. And then shot ourselves in the foot with Cole Adams. He visited like 2 times before he got an offer, and he I mean, he was already a heavy Alabama lean. Like, we got in way too late to really make any impact in trying to sway him back to the good guys.
Yeah, it seems like there's definitely some growing pains in figuring this out for a lot of them, considering how young and new to the positions they are. So we might not see the same, I guess you could say, mistakes for the 24 and 25 classes, but it's hard to be perfect. I mean, there's always hindsight's always 2020, and it's tough to live in the past, but I'm sure that they've learned a lot in this recruiting cycle. So moving on to the last guy we're going to be talking about in this show is Quincy Rhodes Jr. He's another Arkansas commit. He is 6'7", 255 pounds. We have not talked about him on this show. Jacksonville, Arkansas, 2023 four-star edge player. Huge guy. 6'7". He's committed to Arkansas. Barry Odom ended up leaving, who's the defensive coordinator for Arkansas, went and took the head coach of UNLV, which is kind of an interesting move, but whatever. Ever since he's left, it seems like Quincy is a little more open to the idea. Obviously, he probably committed to that defense and to that idea of playing at Arkansas with those coaches, and that has since changed. Oklahoma comes in, offers. They're obviously trying to take another player along that defensive line. It seems like Enow Etta. There hasn't been much momentum there. Could this be the replacement of Etta? And Quincy Rhodes could be that guy, maybe. I think Oklahoma's going to be doing an in-home visit with him, trying to, sway him away. I don't really know where this is going to go, to be honest with you. I mean, jumping in really late, there's a lot of things working in Oklahoma's favor here, considering, the uncertainty at Arkansas, and, this full court press that they're putting on him. I don't really have a read on this. I feel like if Oklahoma really wants him, that they could eventually get him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, again, kind of like Hicks, it'll all depend on, and I haven't read up too much or really heard too much on if Quincy is for sure signing on the 21st, but if he isn't graduating early and doesn't want to be an early enrollee, then you've got a little bit better of a chance. But if he is going to sign in a week, they've got to get him on campus like this weekend. Because if they don't, then this is just kind of a failed effort to try to backfill a couple of spots that have been opened up due to transfer portal departures, because that defensive line did get not gutted, but it is a lot thinner than it was going into last season. So they're going to need to do some work with the transfer portal and get an defensive lineman. And Brent Venables said multiple times he wants to build through the high school ranks, which I'm a fan of. But when you lose this many to the portal on that with the defensive line, you're going to need to fill it in with either high school talent, preferably, in my opinion, transfer talent, because you do need some experience there. You do have young guys in Grace and Halton, Calvin Gilliam, that can contribute next year. But you're also going to want some guys like Lacey who can you feel a little bit more comfortable and they're more ready physically to play day one, and maybe have the younger guys fill in the two deep and eventually take their spots if they earn it later on in the season, kind of like we saw in our Mason Thomas, where he was getting more play time as the season progressed.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, and they're far from over even after this December 21st. I think most high school kids will be signed, but I think they'll still take a few more transfer portal people, depending on who they do sign and who they don't sign from the high school ranks, depending on how a few of these commitments go. You could see some more transfer portal additions past December and going into January or February, and maybe even a straggler of a high school kid that is a late offer or is just dead set on signing in February. I mean, substantially this 23 class is going to be done, but they're bound to add a few more people, I think, after the early national signing day, just to shore up the depth like you're talking about.
Yeah, and they'll have a better idea once the spring semester starts, where they can and which players they can go after for the February national signing day. Because there are those guys that can't graduate early because of their school system or don't want to graduate early, and they just want to sign in February, where they'll have a month and a half to ultimately try to do that last minute pushing, try to get them to flip, or maybe they were guys that hadn't made a decision at that point.
Yeah. So our last topic, a report came out saying that Oklahoma and Texas are, there's a growing sentiment and some momentum of them going to the SEC in 2024. And it seems like that maybe both sides are kind of getting that feeling, as far as both sides being Oklahoma and Texas and then the Big 12. About making this move. It seems, from the surface, it seems like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, in 2024, that's when the college football playoffs is going to 12 teams. That's when UCLA and USC are going to the Big 10. Naturally, why not send Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC in 24, just to have all the change in 1 year? And people might ask, how does this benefit the Big 12? Well, Texas and Oklahoma will have to buy out of their last year of the TV rights, so they'll get a check written for that. But I think a bigger thing is you look at it and you're basically guaranteed at least one playoff contender, one playoff team from the Big 12, and it wouldn't be Oklahoma or Texas. And if you have another really, really solid team that might have lost to an Oklahoma or Texas, you might give them an opportunity to go play in the Big 12 or into the college football playoffs, and so you could have two Big 12 teams that aren't Oklahoma and Texas. And I feel like, from an optics standpoint, as a conference, I think that's a good look, that you might be able to send a Kansas State and a TCU to the playoffs in 24, and you don't have to worry about Oklahoma or Texas spoiling one or two of those spots. It's like in 24, what happens if you send Oklahoma and Texas both to the playoffs and they're about to lead the conference? And then it's like, well, that's your two, the cream of the crops leaving in this conference. This conference sucks. I mean, that's kind of the perception that it could give. What do you think?
The exact same thing you just said. It makes too much sense for the Big 12 to not try to get Oklahoma out by 2024 because of the reasons you mentioned. Plus, it works out for Oklahoma and Texas, or I guess the SEC, because they'll get to either prove that Oklahoma and Texas, or mainly Oklahoma, had it easy in the Big 12, and you can diminish those resumes for the Big 12 to get some of the at-large spots. Or Oklahoma and Texas go in there and prove that they belong in the best conference in college football, and just bolster that the resume of the conference itself. Like, for the conferences, there's really no losing. For Oklahoma and Texas, yeah, there could be some losses in there outside of games, more so like national perspective of the brands. Maybe take a couple hits if they don't perform as soon as they get to the SEC. But the Big 12, if for some reason they don't take that out, they're shooting themselves in the foot and really taking a gamble on how the Big 12 is going to be perceived for the next 5 years after Oklahoma and Texas leave. And looking at the commissioner, Brett Yormark, he's a really smart dude, has had a very successful career so far. I mean, his last two positions were CEO of the Brooklyn Nets, and no matter how much they suck, they're always talked about. And was a big, he was some part of the C-suite for Live Nation, who pretty much runs every single concert and owns almost every single big venue for live events around the country. So he knows how to keep his brands relevant. And looking at, again, how successful he's been, I would assume he understands that the points you just made, getting Oklahoma and Texas out of the Big 12 really mitigates his risk in, if Oklahoma and Texas are what people believe they should be by 2024 and, competing for a Big 12 championship, because they are supposed to get better over a year and they have the brands that would essentially just kind of get them in. Because this year I think was a good example. If Oklahoma or Texas had TCU's resume, no one would be questioning should they be in, because they were undefeated in the regular season and barely lost in the conference championship. But because it was TCU, it was a conversation. I'm like, it makes too much sense. Clearly, it's going to take some time and probably won't get finalized for another couple of months. But Yormark is too smart to to not take this out and force the ADs, no matter how willing they may or may not be, to just let Oklahoma and Texas walk and negotiate down that buyout price, because that's inevitable. I don't think anyone wants to pay full price for a buyout. They're going to try to make it as least amount of money as possible for that.
For sure. So I don't know, something to watch. I'm happy if Oklahoma goes in 24 or 25. Either way, I'm good with it. I think not making the jump to 2023 was big, and it gives Oklahoma this whole next season, a whole nother recruiting cycle to prepare and basically get the program ready to go play in the best conference in all of college football. So, and I hate to do this whole show and not mention it. Mike Leach, obviously, the news came out earlier today on Tuesday about him passing. I hate to see it. Mike Leach was, he was a great coach for Oklahoma, just a great college. When you think of college coaches, at least for me, I think of Mike Leach as well in that class. I wouldn't say, the most winning, the winningest head coach or out there, but his style of offense, the air raid offense, when he was at Texas Tech, and, just his funny interviews. I mean, he was a fixture in college football, and I hate that we lost him when we did. You just goes to show you just never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I echo that. And I was kind of not reminiscing, but just going through social media, and a lot of it was about Coach Leach today, and was reminded about the story with his OU Texas game and throwing out the fake script and seeing how if Texas was going to pick it up. And I mean, that was him. He always had antics, and he was a hilarious dude, seems like. So it sucks that we lost him, but college football definitely going to miss Mike Leach for the rest of our generation. Yeah. Probably he's going to be remembered for a long time.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. So made it this far. Like the video. Do you have an individual challenge for everyone?
You know what? Since we ended on Mike Leach, tell us your favorite Mike Leach moment. Was it the OU Texas throwing out the fake script? Was it an answer he gave at a press conference? Because those are always on point. Throw them in the comment section.
Definitely, that'll be a good one. I'm sure there'll be a lot of good input with that. So made it this far. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And remember, we will be going live 7 p.m. Central on Wednesday, the 21st for early National Signing Day coverage. So be sure to join us for that. And with that said, we will catch you guys Friday morning.